Hello, everyone. I'm Billig, the founder of Self-Publishing Mastery, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to our first July episode, July 2020, for posterity of the Self-Publishing Mastery Talks. And we have a special guest today. We are going to build a bridge from gloomy California, because it's July, but the June gloom is still here, to one of my favorite places on earth, one of my favorite cities, London, because, well, London has a lot to do with self-publishing mastery, with me as a writer, and with my friends and authors and literature and people I love, and with the Alliance of Independent Authors. So without much further ado, hello, Sacha Black. Thank you for being here with us today.
And thank you for inviting me. It's always an honor and a pleasure, so thank you.
So let me tell you that Sacha, if for those who don't know her yet, so she's a woman of many, many talents. So first of all, she's an author. She's also a rebel podcaster, and we're going to talk about that. And she's also a developmental editor, and she's also the conference and blog manager for the Alliance of Independent Authors. And that's how we actually virtually met so far, because the Alliance of Independent Authors, they are doing so many great things for authors around the world, and they are doing these yearly summits, and I was honored to be part of it. She looks very young, like she's a teenager, but she's a mom. How do you find time for writing with this situation that's still happening in the UK? I mean, I think kids are not in school yet, so how do you cope with everything?
Yeah, number one, not so young. Think it's the lighting.
The lighting always matters.
Definitely approaching my mid-30s. But yes, okay, so lockdown. It's been brutal. We are in a situation where schools are open, but only some of the year groups have gone back. Now, I am lucky enough that my son is in one of the year groups that has gone back. Unfortunately, during lockdown, we bought a house, which is just almost an impossibility, but it was an empty property and had been empty for 6 months, so they were allowed to show it. Mm-hmm. So we got to see it, and we brought it, and we are now moved in. And unfortunately, the new district won't allow him to change schools until September. So I am now stuck until September with my son. So it has been, I can't lie, it has been unbelievably difficult on so many levels. It's difficult for him, it's difficult for me, it's difficult for my partner, it's difficult for us as a family unit because we're all on top of each other. Mm-hmm. And my son is he doesn't play with himself very well. He loves people. He's a huge extrovert, and he likes to play with people, with friends, with adults. So he's not super good at entertaining himself. So the first 3 months of lockdown were savage, and I just did what I could. A lot of working in the twilight hours, mostly in the evenings, which was exhausting because I would be parenting all day, and when I could work during the day, I would, and then working all evening. So it was, I felt like I was getting to the point where I was just working for 18 hours a day, be it parenting work or work. And unfortunately, I'm not really in a situation where my partner can help. So my partner works for an organization and continued working just remotely the whole time, and was on conference calls all day, phone calls all day, and there just isn't the ability for them to help. But what I would say is, to the mums out there who are also business women and who are writers or entrepreneurs, these are exceptional circumstances. This is not normal, and therefore you cannot expect a normal productivity out of yourself. Mm-hmm. You can't expect to deliver on goals, all of your goals anyway. You can't expect to parent in the same way. You can't expect to manage anything in the same way. And that's okay, because this is a time limited thing. This is not going to go on forever. I know there's lots of people saying, oh, you know, until the vaccine and blah, blah, blah. No, listen, it is not going to go on forever. So, you know what? If your kid has a bit more technology, it's okay. It's not going to be like this forever. And, you know, I can't claim to have got it right all the time, but I'm just doing my best, and I'm trying not to beat myself up, because it's so easy as a woman to wrap yourself up in parental guilt. And then what are you doing? Like, realistically, you're bashing yourself when all you're doing is trying to do your best. And it's, you know, it's rich coming from me, because I've definitely I've had some weeks where I've done that. But yeah, now we have moved. Thank goodness, my mum is now close. So sort of one day a week, she's taking him, and I'm working from the moment my eyes open until I collapse in the evening, because that enables me to then be more present when he's around. So, you know, it's just, yeah, it's managing any which way you can right now is okay. It is okay.
I mean, these are two really empowering messages. Like, first of all, not beating yourself up and realizing that's okay, that you're doing what you can, the best you can at every moment. And then the other thing is, this is not going to last forever, despite what media tries to make us believe. So these are two really empowering messages. And then you mentioned being a businesswoman, and I think that's something that women who are writing, but then, you know, men who are watching and are taking the self-publishing route, but even the traditional publishing route, this is something to consider, that we are nowadays more like business people if we are really serious about making an impact in the world with our books. Before getting into that, I want to mention that when we scheduled this interview, and this was a month ago, so this is how disciplined you are with your time, you also mentioned, oh, we can do it like after 8, because I have dedicated family time every day. And I think this is great, because although we are working from home, I think creating these windows of time where we are focusing on one thing and not on a million things at a time can definitely help with our productivity.
It can, and it helps with the mindset too. And it also helps with expectations. So my son expects me not to be working. I expect myself to not be working. And, you know, we also have rules like no technology at the table, because you have to have some sacred space away from the media, or away from, you know, social media, or away from work. So yeah, it's just, and look, I am not perfect. Some days, you know, I replied to you today, but some days we do. But it's about, if you don't have those boundaries, then everything leaks into everything else. At least if you have those boundaries and you put them out into the world, then most of the time you'll adhere to them.
Listening to you, Sacha, I can tell that you are passionate about self-improvement. I've been an advocate for a while of actually using them on a regular basis to enhance creativity, to avoid writer's block. So I would like you to elaborate a little bit on this topic and tell us about what self-improvement means to you and how it helps you.
So I think there's a couple of levels. The first one is that I am a perpetual student. I will learn until I am either blind with old age, or I'm deaf, or I can't, you know, I cannot take in anymore. So I will always study. And so the self-improvement is on a variety of levels. One, it's for my business. I always try to improve myself on multiple levels: marketing, writing, so the actual craft, business, mindset. They're the four that I try to improve on in my business. But so that's one level of self-improvement. The other level of self-improvement is very much the personal, you know, my personal mindset, mental health, that kind of stuff. You know how they say you are the product of the 5 most closest people to you. Well, I think that's also the case of what you're putting into yourself. So if you put in trash TV for 5 hours a day, you're going to be a product of the trash TV. If you put in educational podcasts or marketing podcasts, or you put in documentaries, or you put in non-fiction books, you will become a product of that. I never intentionally do this, but when I count at the end of the year, I have always, over the course of the year, read half of non-fiction and half fiction. And I find that whilst most of the self-help books don't really tell me anything new, they are telling me in a different way, and they always reiterate lessons and remind me, and for me they are a beacon of hope. They are a slice of positivity that I can put into my day. And usually I'll read, first thing in the morning or last thing at night, and either I start my day with a slice of positivity, or I end my day with a slice of positivity. And I always think, if I keep putting these things in, keep reminding myself, eventually you start habitualizing the actions and the habits and the knowledge. And I never want to stop learning. I never want to stop putting that goodness into me, because it means I will keep iterating and optimizing my business, and I will keep, in turn, giving that positivity out to other people.
Any other tools for your mental and emotional hygiene as a writer?
Yeah, audiobooks always, podcasts also, and also interviews like this. So talking to other writers and using my podcast as a means and a tool to do that. I honestly think everybody should have a podcast, because it's the most effective networking tool I have come across, other than in-person conferences. Also mastermind groups. So I have possibly 2 or 3 I'm trying to count now, I'm bound to forget something, but a couple of mastermind groups that have peers, so people who are in the industry at a similar level, but have different models or whatever, and we are there for the good days for each other and the bad days for each other. And there's never allowed to be any apologies for the bad days, but also we will then also brainstorm how people come out of things. So I use mastermind groups, and also accountability, because that helps keep my mindset focused on producing and delivering. So I have a long-term accountability partner. I have a podcast that's kind of a form of accountability as well, which is a different podcast, the Rebel podcast. And other than that, I have a bit of a volatile relationship, but I do try and meditate. I'll do it for like 4 months, and then I'll fall off the bandwagon, and I won't do it for 3, and then I'll get back on the bandwagon. But yes, I love meditation as well.
Yeah, I hope you would say that because I love meditation. I start my mornings. It's always part of my morning routine, and actually included in a program for authors that's called Stress Less, Write More, because I think stress is something that can really take a really hard hit on our creativity. Many authors are considering starting a podcast, but I think some of them are kind of scared because they would have to learn a whole new set of skills. How was your learning curve?
I am not technically brilliant, and I managed to do it. If I can do it, anybody can do it. There is a learning curve, and I won't lie about that, but there are ways to make your life easier. So if, for example, you choose a podcast host, they will push your podcast out to all of the platforms that people listen on. And that makes your life a lot easier. I think the biggest lesson I can give anybody is to keep it simple. So I started the Rebel Author podcast and went in all bells, whistles, and it was too much. So up until lockdown, I was doing transcripts on everything. Oh, wow. And and though each transcript, although it is transcribed by AI, it took an hour to edit to make it, seem reasonable. Yeah. we didn't, when we started the Next Level Author podcast, I was like, we're not doing that. And I've had to stop them because of lockdown, because there just isn't enough time in my working week, and I had to sacrifice things. So, I mean, the technical side of it, the most difficult thing that you have to do with a podcast is to snip bits of audio. So you're literally looking at a waveform and you're listening to it, you make a mistake, and you almost like cutting out a sentence in Word, you cut out that bit of audio. And that's honestly the hardest part of podcasting. But you know, for me, that it wasn't that was difficult. For me, it was reaching out to people. I was absolutely petrified of pitching people, and for me, that's why I wanted to do it, because it would push me to network and to do things that I'm scared of, like communicating and doing an interview with somebody I've never met before. You know, that's terrifying to me. Don't be scared. Do it. It's fantastic. It is the best networking tool that I have, especially in lockdown. And more than that, you as the interviewer get to learn so many things from other people. Yes. And so for no other reason, do it for selfish reasons. Because it's wonderful. Yeah.
This brings us back to what you were talking about earlier when we started our conversation about self-improvement, and you mentioned that there are several areas in your life you are doing the self-improvement stuff, and so one is the writing craft, one is the business side. And these are all aspects where the Alliance of Independent Authors helps authors. And although this is an organization based in the UK, it is open to authors from all over the world.
Yes, it is. It is. And I am very fortunate to get to work with Orna, who is the director and the founder at the Alliance of Independent Authors. And she is just fantastically knowledgeable. So the way I see ALLi, and this is not with a professional ALLi hat on, but just as a member of the organization, for me, it's like a union. You know, there's unions for teachers, there's unions for police officers, there's societies for traditionally published authors, but there was nothing for indie authors. And so in my mind, it's very much a union of sorts. But one of the things that I love about ALLi is that they also campaign on our behalf. So they will campaign on things like in the UK, they just lifted VAT on ebooks. And ALLi campaigned and lobbied the government, and they lobby in other countries too. And they will do global lobbying campaigns, and Orna will speak in different countries on behalf of indie authors. And they're constantly trying to improve their offering. So, for example, there's now Ethan Ellenberg, who is a literary agent, who is now one of the advisors for ALLi, who will advise for members in the organization. So because of ALLi, you can have access to a literary agent. And for example, I'm in the process of doing a collaboration. And so I sent the contract to Ethan as a literary agent, as a member, not as part of the team, but as a member, and was like, hey, can you check this out? And he did. And that's aside from all of the juicy discounts that you get by being part of a member. I mean, for me alone, the ALLi discount that I get with Ingram Spark pays for the membership itself. You only have to upload 2 books a year and it's already paid for itself. And then all of the learning. So every Monday we have these huge, great big 5,000 word blog posts that are in depth on a topic in the industry. We have the podcast, which, tries to go across all of the different aspects of publishing. And we also have the conference, which is twice a year. And that is 24 hours of content over 24 hours. And we always have phenomenal guests, guest speakers with, who are at the top of the industry. Like people like Mark Lefebvre. We've had BookBub, we've had Joanna Penn, Mark Dawson.
I think you had Jane Friedman, right?
Yep, Jane Friedman we've had her a couple of times.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think. I mean, literally, Angela Ackerman, another one. You name it, they have been in the conference. So it is a fantastic conference. There are always members of the Alliance at London Book Fair. And they've got like a indie author HQ that's put on by London Book Fair, and that's basically where all of the indie authors congregate. And the wonderful thing about London Book Fair is that you have people like Mark Dawson, like Michael Anderle, like Joanna, just mingling. And that's what makes I just love the indie community, and the fact that everybody's so down to earth and they just hang out there. It's fantastic.
I'd like to know more about your books and your writing process, and what are you doing to connect with readers?
Oh, so many questions. Okay, so I write both fantasy and I write nonfiction. So my fantasy, I've published some young adult fantasy, and probably next year I'll be moving into adult fantasy. And my nonfiction is writing craft books to help writers develop their craft. And they are very much in the ethos and tone of my podcast, which is cheeky, sweary, rebellious, sarcastic. They're meant to be humorous writing guides.
Well, we need that, right? I mean, we have had enough of traditional schooling, so we need something that's
exactly. And I don't think that I consume so many craft books, and I am so bored of craft books that are dry. There's just no need for it. And I think it's the ultimate irony that people would have writing craft books showing you how to write that are really written very boring. Like, why? What? Just makes no sense to me. So I write those. In terms of how I connect, I have mailing lists for both of them, and I have an extremely engaged Facebook group for my non-fiction side, which I have been focusing on more than my fiction of late, but towards the end of that year I'm going to be swapping that around. But so I do a lot of lives, so live Q&As. I try to always foster like two-way communication. So that's why I include listener rebellions on the podcast, because I like to get people to engage. We have accountability in my Facebook group as well, so a weekly thread in there, and everybody posts what they're going to do each week, and we get hundreds of comments every week. So I do the Q&As. What else do I do to connect? I'm very active on Instagram as well, and I will always do like random Q&As. So if people want to ask questions, I'll just dedicate an hour and answer loads of questions about writing, marketing, or publishing. And then all of the usual channels like advertising, just to get people through the door. But yes, I try to make myself available as much as I can without doing a detriment to my writing time. And I try to give back as much as I can. So that's another thing I do. I run irregular, but I run a writing sprints session called Poison and Prose. And in my Facebook group, usually on a Wednesday, sometimes with a guest, I will go live, and everybody will have a poison, and it could be gin, it could be chocolate, it could be nachos, it could be whatever, it could be fruit if that's what you choose your poison to be. And then we write prose, and we do writing sprints, and then I will do question and answer sessions between the sprints. So I try to engage, and I'll run polls, things like that as well. I just try and be there for people and be helpful and to give back. And that tends to foster highly engaged groups, I think.
You have two different audiences. So you have people like me who are authors and want to improve my marketing craft, and then you have the readers. So how do you separate and present yourself in the world? I mean, your public persona, so you won't confuse people.
It's difficult and also very simple. So I am simplifying it somewhat because the way that I have it set up currently is more complicated than I'd like. So the biggest thing that I do is I keep my mailing lists separate. So I have a separate fiction list and a separate nonfiction list. Mostly I try to promote my fiction through Instagram, but there is a bit of a bleed because there are a lot of the Bookstagram community who are also usually young adult readers, are also aspiring authors. Yeah. So there is bleed, and I am noticing that the more nonfiction I sell, craft books, the more of my fiction I'm selling without advertising the fiction. So I know that there is a crossover. I would say that it is much easier for me to engage with writers and my nonfiction audience on a one-to-one or one-to-many level than it is with my readers, so my young adult readers. So for me personally, most of that engagement comes through the mailing list and advertising. So I tend to pick up a lot of my readers for fiction through advertising, and the only engagement that I get other than through Instagram follows and the odd comment there is through my mailing list. And that's okay. They are different audiences with different needs. Yeah. And for a long time I thought, I need to be providing the same level of engagement. And actually I don't think I do. There are some genres who, they just want to read the books and don't necessarily want to engage with the authors. And I think particularly for my young adult genre, that is a split. So for example, the younger young adults, so the true young adults, become super fans, and they do want to engage, and they want to go to festivals and see authors speaking. Whereas there's a whole group of middle-aged women who are still reading young adult books, and they don't care so much. They just want to read the books. In terms of the branding and me, that is why I am changing things slightly. So I think I made a mistake in that I wrote young adult because I love to read it, and I wrote something that I thought was to market, which wasn't necessarily what I wanted to write. So going forward, I'm moving into adult fantasy because I can keep my 3 values, which I'll mention in a minute, in the style, and it will be much more natural. Whereas I had to cultivate the voice for young adult. So my 3 values that I put into my nonfiction and my sort of nonfiction persona are being motivational, knowledgeable, and rebellious. And it's that rebellious side that I want to put into my fiction. And I can't really with the young adult, or not in the way that I would like to. So yes, that is why I'm moving away from that and moving into adult fiction. I've got 2 series planned, and I think that will help somewhat with they will never be the same audiences, but just being a bit more of a holistic brand. When you split by genre like that, it's essentially 2 completely different businesses, which requires, and each business is a full-time job. And I just cannot do that. So I'm trying to bring everything under one brand.
Yeah, and me too. And I think that can be one of the secrets of actually pulling it off, finding these core values that stand as a foundation to everything you're doing, and then you can kind of build around those values and deliver different products. I think that can be an option.
Absolutely. And even down to the sentence level and allowing it to influence your prose. I with the rebellious side in my nonfiction, like I said, I put swear words in, or I'll I'll allow tangential, whimsical, sarcastic sentences in there, whereas somebody who is trying to, might have professional, knowledgeable and educational as their values, might not do that. So it's, once you have your values, you can then allow that to influence your word choices even. And that is how you truly then embody your brand.
Yeah. And being authentic, I think people can feel it right away that you're being authentic, and then they will be drawn to the real you and to who you are.
Exactly.
You are a writer and then you are an editor too. How does it work? How do you switch roles?
I would say it's been slightly detrimental to my own writing, only in that it's slowed me down. So it's been obviously extremely positive for the quality of my books, but it's been detrimental in that I have to try and separate the critical, which can be quite overwhelming when you're then an editor as well. And I also have my own editor, so I won't edit my books to publication. I will always have a separate editor. And I also have, so my process, I essentially write the book. I write out of order. It's very annoying. I can't help it. I always write out of order, even my nonfiction, which is even more infuriating. But yes, so I will write higgledy-piggledy, and then I will puzzle piece the book together. And I will then give it to my critique partner who I've worked with for many, many years. And I only allow that one person to look at my book. And I will then take on board or not their feedback. And mostly I do. There's very rare occasion that I don't take on the feedback. And then once I've done those edits, I then give it to an editor to polish, essentially do the proofing and the grammar and stuff. There are times I won't take on clients, and there are times that I will take on clients. So if, for example, I am deep in drafting, that's a good time to take on a client, because the editing brain is a different brain to the drafting brain. If I'm editing my work, I don't like to then take on clients because it's too draining. If I'm in launch phase, I also don't take on clients, but that's usually just because of time. So yes, I often get booked up as well. So I'm trying these days to do slightly less of it, just because it's very time intensive, and I do very intensive edits. I'm a very intensive, detailed editor. And not everybody likes that, to be honest with you. But yes, that is what drove me to write my latest book, which is The Anatomy of Prose.
When is a good time for an author to start working with a developmental editor like you?
When they feel like they have taken the book as far as they possibly can. I would say make sure you've had some kind of feedback from beta readers who are writers. So the reader feedback comes later. I know that that's a controversial statement. Some people would say, oh, you should only have reader feedback, but I completely disagree. I think you have to have writers who are, to give you feedback first. So you've drafted, you've edited yourself, you've had some beta feedback from other writers, you've done their edits. When you are fannying around with commas and changing the odd words, and you feel like you can't see any other areas for development for you to change and edit, that's a good time to get a second opinion. What I would also say is that if you have a good developmental editor, getting your feedback back is going to be a shock. And if it's not a shock, you've probably not got a good enough editor. I still remember the first time I got my feedback back, I was gutted. But you know what? I was so much better afterwards. And this is the purpose of a developmental edit. It is to help you improve. And I also think not just your story, but you as a writer, lots of editors won't give you the teaching, whereas I do, and that's why I'm slightly more expensive, and why mine are slightly more in depth, because I not only pick up where you have something for consideration. I always call it consideration or thought, because it's not up to me to edit your book. That's your decision. It's your story. But I also give people the why. Why should you consider changing this? Why should you look at this? And that's what the Anatomy of Prose does, the book. It essentially gives you a developmental edit. That is the purpose of the book. It shows you all these literary tools, the mistakes you can make, and why you should consider changing them. So I will, in that book, I'll give, for example, 3 examples. This is what happens when you just you filter, for example. This is what your writing looks like when you filter. This is what your writing looks like when you don't filter. Which one do you prefer? And the answer is usually the one without the mistake.
Oh yeah. Oh.
But yeah, so like, your editor should be giving you the reason why something needs to change as well, not just you need to change this to this, or without that explanation. I think when looking for an editor, that's something I always look for. Is the editor going to teach me something as well? And it's, I have had editors argue until they're blue in the face that that's not their job to teach you, but I think it is.
I can't wait to read your book. Where we can find it? It's on Amazon. It's on Amazon. Everywhere. Okay.
Yeah, I publish wide, so on all the stores. You should. I think even for paperbacks, it's everywhere. Book Depository, all of the usual Barnes and Noble, places like that. Yes, and depending, so I have one on crafting better villains, one on crafting better heroes, and then one on the Anatomy of Prose. So depending on where you are in your writing journey, depends on which one you might want to read.
So what's next?
I am in the process of finishing my first course, which is a companion course to the Anatomy of Prose, and I will probably do more courses after that. They will always be craft courses. I'm not sure if I'll venture into the business side. I might, but at the moment, at least, I'll be doing that. And then also recording the audiobook. I will also be then going back to the fiction to finish my young adult series, and so I can move into the adult fantasy.
Wow, it looks like a busy and exciting summer. Thank you so much, Sacha, for being with us today. And
thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.